The streetlights flickered, casting eerie shadows that danced on the pavement. Each flicker seemed to pulse with an unsettling rhythm, making the night feel even more ominous. A low hum filled the air, punctuated by the distant bark of a dog. The sound seemed to echo through the empty streets, adding to the sense of isolation and unease that hung in the air. I hugged my cardigan tighter, my breath a pale cloud in the night. The cold seemed to seep into my bones, making me shiver uncontrollably. Every exhale was a reminder of how alone I was in that moment. My phone buzzed, a discordant chime in the silence. The sudden noise made me jump, my heart racing as I fumbled to pull it out of my pocket.
Don't open the door. An unknown number. The message was simple, yet it sent a chill down my spine. Who would send such a cryptic warning? And why? A shiver ran down my spine, cold and unwelcome. The night seemed to grow colder, the air thicker with tension. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. It was probably just a prank, a cruel joke. I tried to convince myself that there was nothing to worry about, but the unease lingered, gnawing at the edges of my mind. But the street seemed to grow darker, the shadows deeper. Every step I took felt heavier, as if the darkness itself was trying to pull me in.
My hand trembled as I fumbled for my keys. The metal felt cold and unforgiving in my grasp, and I struggled to steady my shaking fingers. I wanted to dismiss it, to laugh it off, but the fear was real, and it clung to me like a shadow, refusing to let go. But the message, stark and cold, wouldn't leave my mind. Don't open the door. The words echoed in my head, a haunting refrain that refused to be ignored. The houses stood like silent sentinels, windows dark and lifeless. The wind whispered through the trees, a low, mournful sound. My footsteps echoed on the pavement, loud and solitary.
Don't open the door. The words flashed before her eyes, a neon sign in the darkness of her fear. She glanced over her shoulder, half expecting to see someone watching her.
There was nothing there, of course, just the shadows and the wind, but the feeling persisted, a prickling unease that crawled beneath my skin.
Her key rattled in the lock, the sound amplified in the stillness. Finally, the door swung open, releasing a musty scent of old wood and dust. She stepped inside, relief washing over her.
A sharp rap on the door made me jump. My heart hammered against my ribs. It was probably just a branch, tossed by the wind. I tried to ignore it, to convince myself it was nothing.
But the message on her phone screamed its silent warning. Don't open the door. She stood frozen, caught between reason and the chilling premonition that something was terribly wrong. Silence descended again, heavy and absolute.
I held my breath, listening for any sound, any indication of what lay beyond the door.
My phone slipped from my grasp, clattering to the floor. 2 more knocks, louder this time, echoed through the house.
Panic welled up inside me, a suffocating wave.
Don't open the door! The message was a lifeline, a beacon in the encroaching darkness.
I took a step back, my hand trembling as I reached for the deadbolt. My fingers brushed against the cold metal, but I couldn't bring myself to lock it. Fear, raw and primal, held me captive.
3 knocks, deliberate, menacing. Each one seemed to echo with a sinister intent, as if the very wood of the door was trembling in fear. The sound was not just a noise, it was a harbinger of something dreadful, something that lay beyond the threshold, waiting to be unleashed. They reverberated through the house, each one a hammer blow to my sanity. The walls seemed to close in, the air growing thick with dread. Every corner of the house seemed to amplify the sound, turning it into a cacophony of terror that gnawed at my very soul.
I stumbled back, my back hitting the wall. My heart pounded in my chest, each beat a desperate plea for escape. My legs felt like lead, refusing to carry me away from the impending doom. I could feel the cold sweat trickling down my spine, a stark reminder of my helplessness. The phone lay forgotten on the floor, its warning useless now. It had been my lifeline, my connection to the outside world, but now it was just a silent witness to my terror. The screen flickered briefly, as if mocking my futile attempts to call for help.
The door creaked open slowly, as if drawn by an unseen hand. The sound was almost unbearable, a prolonged screech that seemed to pierce through the very fabric of reality. It was as if the door was a portal, opening into a realm of nightmares. A cold wind swept in, carrying with it the scent of damp earth and something else, something ancient and evil. The air was thick with the smell of decay, a putrid reminder of the malevolent force that had been awakened. It was a scent that spoke of death and despair, of things long buried and best forgotten.
I squeezed my eyes shut, unable to face what waited on the other side. My mind raced with images of unspeakable horrors, each one more terrifying than the last. I could feel the presence drawing closer, its malevolent energy seeping into my very being. I prayed for it to be a nightmare, for the darkness to swallow me whole.
A low growl, guttural and inhuman, sent shivers down my spine. It was a sound that defied explanation, a primal noise that spoke of ancient evils and forgotten terrors. The growl seemed to vibrate through the very walls, a dark symphony of dread that left me paralyzed with fear. I felt a presence in the doorway, something cold and malevolent, something that defied all rational thought. It was as if the darkness itself had taken form, a shadowy figure that exuded pure evil. My mind struggled to comprehend the horror, but deep down I knew that this was only the beginning. Across town, in a brightly lit apartment, a young man sat hunched over his phone. The room was silent, except for the faint hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of the floorboards. He had been waiting for a message, but not this one. His brow furrowed as he read the message, his heart pounding in his chest. The words on the screen seemed to blur as his mind raced to make sense of them.
A slow, icy dread crept over him. It was as if the temperature in the room had dropped several degrees. He could feel the cold sweat forming on his forehead.
Don't answer the door. The message was simple, yet it carried a weight that made his hands tremble.
He glanced nervously at the door, his mind replaying the cryptic warning. What could it mean? Who would send such a message? The message was from a number he didn't recognize, a number with no name or profile picture. It was as if it had come from nowhere, from someone who didn't exist. Just a blank, empty space. The anonymity of it all made it even more unsettling.
He wanted to dismiss it, to laugh it off as a prank. Maybe it was just a friend playing a joke on him, but something held him back, a growing sense of unease that he couldn't shake off. It was as if his instincts were screaming at him to take it seriously. He could almost hear it now, a faint rapping sound coming from the other side of the door. His breath caught in his throat as he strained to listen. Was it just his imagination, or was someone really there? The silence of the apartment seemed to amplify every little noise, making his heart race even faster. He knew he had to make a decision, and quickly. Should he heed the warning, or face whatever was on the other side of that door?